Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you may be. It's a pleasure to be hosting this webinar today on the Portuguese Golden Visa opportunity. And I'm delighted to bring with me here Rakesh and Rosie from Arish Capital. Rakesh, Rosie, welcome. How are you both?
Thank you very well indeed, Grant. Nice to be here with you today.
Great, really nice to see you both again and looking forward to working with you through the webinar. So thank you very much indeed for joining. So I'm now going to start the webinar. And first of all, I'm going to give a little bit of background to IP Global and our business model, because I know there's a lot of people on the line here who have not experienced one of these webinars before, who are familiar with the business. So let me get into the first slide and tell you a little bit about IP Global. So from my side, I've been in the business since 2006. I've been in the business 16 years here in Hong Kong, which is our head office, where we have over 50 people. We've got 100 people globally. So that really says it all pretty much from the business perspective. So creating wealth through intelligent property investment. In effect, we are a research-driven end-to-end property investment company. We do everything from sourcing the investment right the way through to helping the client through every step of the investment journey. And it's all about, for us, building a long-term relationship with the client to help them grow their investment property portfolio. Next slide, please, Bella. So in terms of track record, what distinguishes us is we are not specific to one particular market. We have invested in over 18 countries since I joined the business in 2006. Here's a snapshot of some of those main markets. But in terms of in real time, UK and Germany are two of our biggest markets. We've actually transacted over £1 billion of investment in the UK now. And Germany as well is a market we've been working in for nearly 8 years and have transacted over 100 million euros. And these are two markets that we will be investing heavily in 2022 across Leipzig and Berlin, where we have upcoming projects, and across regional UK and London in the next number of months. And of course, with all the restrictions having been lifted in UK, we see a very bright outlook in 2022 for property investing. Next slide, please, Bella. So there's a summary of us as a business. We've sold 5,700 properties since we set up. We've transacted over $3 billion of property in 18 countries. And what this tells you is that we have tremendous experience. We are very experienced in investing across a lot of markets over this 16-year period since we set up in business. Next slide, please, Bella. Okay, so I'm just going to formally introduce Rosie and Rakesh at this point. So Arish Capital Partners are a company that we've been working with now for quite some time. We did a couple of webinars actually last year for projects in Porto and Lisbon. And it's an absolute pleasure to have Rosie and Rakesh back for this webinar today. And I'm just going to let them say a couple of words about their business and where they're located. And then obviously I'll get into the investment case for Portugal before Rakesh and Rosie will share more detail on the Golden Visa and also the specific project we're going to talk about today. So Rosie, Rakesh, the floor is yours for a couple of minutes just to talk about your business.
Sure, thank you, Grant. And once again, it's great being here with IP Global again. I think we've now been working together for a few years and long may that continue. I think if, Bella, we can go to the next slide. I think a sensible place for us to start is really to give you a quick introduction to who we are and what we do. So Arish is a real estate investment and development company. We've been going now for coming up to 11 years. We have proprietary investment capital of our own that we've invested in that period in excess of 200 million. We have offices in Dubai, in London and in Lisbon. And whilst we very much started out with our investment profile being centered on the UK, at least for the first 6 years or so, we focused on quite niche asset sectors such as student accommodation, care homes for the elderly, etc. Some of those we went on to exit institutionally, others we continued to sit on as part of our own sort of yield portfolio. But for the last 5 years or so, we've very much become bought into the Portugal story. We like the macroeconomics there, we like the stability in the government, and we think there's various factors that actually support real estate investment, both pre and post-COVID. Some of those investments continue to be proprietary in nature to us. Others are in the space of being residential apartments, which are Golden Visa eligible. We'll come on to talk about our recently launched project in a moment. But if Bella, you can go to the next slide, just to break down our business a little more for people to get some clarity. We obviously continue to be quite strong in the UK. Our investments continue there. We have our investment team there. We obviously have good access to assets that we like to be invested in. So that work continues in the UK. We've also started to do quite a bit of investment, as I say, in the last 5 years in Portugal, some of which relates to this residency and citizenship type of investments, which we'll come on to explain in a moment. And then lastly, we also are an investor in other people's projects in other countries. We know that real estate is, by its very nature, a very local business. And whilst we have local expertise in the UK and Portugal, we appreciate that there are people better placed in different countries that offer us a good investment opportunity. So that is us in a nutshell. I'll pass you back to Grant now, I think, who will do a far better job of me explaining the country of Portugal as an introduction. So back to you, Grant.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you for the overview of Arish Capital. So let me now get into a little bit on Portugal specifically. So I've been to Portugal a number of times over the years, and it is really truly a beautiful country, sitting there on the southern tip of Europe on the Atlantic Ocean. Population of 10.5 million, very high average life expectancy, given the quality of life there. For those of you who are not aware, Portuguese is the fifth most spoken language, but actually English is widely spoken across the country, which makes it very, very attractive for business people and people to live and work in Portugal. It's one of the key standout facts for the country. Currency is a euro, excellent all year round climate, and affordable cost of living. We could also add a whole host of other comments there. Rule of law is very good, crime is low, and there are a whole host of other factors on this sort of beautiful country, which we're going to talk about this evening. So Bella, can you just go on to the next slide, please? So let's have a look at the economy. So I think the first thing we'd say is, if you look at the financial crisis, Portugal went through a terrible time. And in fact, it wasn't really until 2014, 2015 that the economy really started to recover. But that actually, in many respects, is the opportunity, because most other countries post the financial crisis only started recovering round about sort of 2009. So they started recovering a lot earlier than Portugal. And therefore, they have seen significantly more growth in many respects. But it's only the last few years that the growth has been returning to Portugal. Now, I put up the IMF forecast GDP for last year as 3%, just to give some context, because for 2022, we're looking at sort of GDP growth of 5.8%. So in actual fact, from a sort of a post-pandemic perspective, we are seeing very, very strong growth returning to Portugal. Partly reason, the population of over 10 million is majority vaccinated. The economy is very much open for business now. And we are seeing also unemployment levels almost return to pre-pandemic levels as we go through this year. But just sort of going back to the financial crisis, I mean, it took many, many years of austerity to really get the Portuguese economy back in order. There's been some very good business policies that have come back into play, and they've created a really, really strong economy. Travel and tourism has always been the sort of bread and butter of Portugal. But if you look at what's been happening in recent times, it has become a leading tech hub. There are over 450 startup businesses in Lisbon alone. Porto as well has a very strong tech edge. The market of real estate across commercial, retail, residential, warehouse logistics, all of these markets are looking favourable in 2022. And they have a burgeoning student market. There are over 397,000 students in Portugal, both homegrown and international, and they are getting well equipped to go into the workforce and really start to drive the Portuguese economy. So next slide, please, Bella. So in terms of the presence of multinationals in Portugal, we could go on with a long, long list. When I was in Lisbon, I expected to see sort of small sub-offices of big multinationals. Instead, I saw very big offices with potentially hundreds of staff, from legal firms that I would recognize here in Hong Kong to tech companies, IBM, Facebook, Google, etc. All had very big presences. And we've listed some of the other corporates that you will see with big numbers of employees there. Why are they there? Well, it's a very business-friendly economy. As I say, since sort of the financial crisis, lots of corporates have been encouraged to come. There is a highly skilled, intelligent workforce, degree educated in significant numbers, which is very attractive to the big corporates. And also, there's been sort of fundamental changes, as I say, with business policy, which has made it very attractive for corporates to move in. If you look at, for example, places like Lisbon, they hold the Web Summit, which is the largest tech summit in the world, which attracts many, many people each year. And then they leave their presence in terms of setting up businesses. But for Lisbon, Porto, right the way across the country, we see lots of big corporates moving in and increasing headcount. Next slide, please, Bella. Okay, so investor benefits. So if you're investing in property in Portugal, you're investing in a market where we clearly see value, and I'll share that actually on the next slide. We see a very robust economy, stable market diversification, stable government, which has attracted lots of foreign direct investment over the last number of years. And also, in terms of investing, when you look at the various sectors in the economy, in the property market, you see lots of opportunity for good yield and good returns with government subsidies as well. Just one point I'd like to add actually on the real estate market that obviously we're talking about today is very interesting statistic I saw. Between 2002 and 2012, there were 800,000 units of property that came onto the market. And then with greater regulation, from 2012 to 2021, there's actually been 180,000 units that have come onto the market. Now, I raise that stat because in terms of property investment, it's always about one of the key factors of looking at supply versus demand. So we know that supply of property, particularly in the residential sector, is very tight. However, the demand for entrance into Portugal through schemes like the Golden Visa is very, very strong. And that is something that will really underpin the property market for quite some years now, because planning rules and regulations since the financial crisis have really been ramped up, and therefore there is very little projects that typically come to the market compared to pre-financial crisis days. So that in many respects sums up the opportunity for Portugal. So next slide, please, Bella. Okay, so this slide is worth looking at in terms of all about affordability. You know, one of the other factors that we look at before we decide to move forward in any project is affordability. How do rents stack up to average salaries? How do property prices stack up to income? These are some of the key bits of data that we are very, very keen to look at. And if you look at this particular slide, it's one of those where you really do want to be at the bottom of the table. And in terms of affordability, when you look at rents to salaries, when you look at prices of property to incomes, it's extremely affordable in Portugal. It's just Germany, which is obviously another big market that we are investing heavily in and have been for many years, that sits below Portugal in terms of affordability. So, you know, that's another factor that investors need to be aware of on a very, very positive note when they're looking to make investments in the asset class of real estate. And then, of course, if we compare the price per square meter from London to Paris to Berlin to Madrid, and then we see Lisbon sitting at round about a third of London. So extremely good value as a capital city to invest in, and that's replicated right the way across Portugal. So if we're looking at places like Porto, if we were looking at the Algarve, which is obviously is going to be the focus of today's project, we will compare Algarve, for example, to other resort type locations where there's a lot of investment going in, very, very favorably in terms of the pricing, because these economics are relevant to every aspect of Portugal. So next slide, please, Bella. Okay, so just moving on with property. If you look at Portugal, very low interest rates. You know, since the financial crisis, very much debt has been under control. Good policies from the central bank. Strong economic conditions have been put in place for many years. And because rule of law is good, crime is low, very good governance, FDI has been increasing year on year. So in terms of the property market, we've seen prices increase by around about 9.9% over the last year, about sort of 40% over the last sort of 5 years or so. House price growth in Lisbon has been strong and resilient. Interest rates have been low for quite some time, underpinning the economy. And if you look at all of the major reports from CBRE to Savills, etc., they are all saying the same thing for 2022, that the market has a very bright outlook. And as I say, post the pandemic era, what we're now seeing as Portugal and Europe essentially are opening up very strongly, normal market conditions are returning. And of course, what that means is there's a lot of pent-up demand for property investing that's being released. You know, I've shared with you that affordability is very good. And also there is a lack of supply. So put all that together, and that does bode extremely well for Portugal. So next slide, please, Bella. Okay, right. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Rakesh, who's going to share the specifics of the Golden Visa program and really sort of accentuate some of the main points that make the Portuguese Golden Visa program, you know, a very special an attractive opportunity for those who are looking at obtaining the EU passport. So Rakesh, over to you.
Thank you, Grant. And I'll run through the salient features of the Golden Visa program, but maybe if I could just highlight some of the factors that Grant went through very well in terms of the introduction to Portugal and the economic analysis. And those were very much the factors when we, as an investment company 5 or so years ago, were looking at Portugal, decided that we wanted to become invested into Portugal because there was value that we saw, and indeed that is now playing out and continues to play out. And I think for those of you that are thinking about international investments, as most of our investors, some time and due diligence on the economic analysis will pay dividends indeed and give you confidence. But turning to the Golden Visa program itself, because I know a lot of you may well be thinking about this, I think it's important to sort of run through how popular the program has been. And indeed, it has been going since 2012. So what that means is that because we're now in its 10th year, we do have the ability to look back and see whether there has been a proof of concept, whether residency permits have indeed been issued, etc. All these things that people will rightfully be thinking about. And here you can see there's some metrics that we put up. Starting with the top there, you can see since the program launch, in excess of 10,000 residence permits have been issued. And then you take into account that if you have a main applicant is able to reunify its family members. So there's been another 17,000 residency permits that have been issued to family members. So in excess of 27,000 since its launch. So you do very much have proof of concept that the program, as described and as advertised, is very much working. It has in the process raised in that period of time over 6 billion of investment into Portugal. So I think these sort of factors are important to keep in mind when you may well be thinking about other European offerings that perhaps are offering programs as well. Not all of them are the same, or at least not all of them have the depth of test that Portugal does. Let me go to the next slide, because I think, Bella, we can then illustrate why the Portugal program has been so popular. And part of the reason is because of its requirements, which are relatively simple in the sense that there are 4 key ones, which are: you need to have a valid passport from your home country. You should have a clean criminal record, and I'd suggest you should have that in any event. Proof that you can fund the investment or the requisite threshold amount to qualify for the Golden Visa program. And for the next 5 years, you only need to spend 7 days a year. So those are the 4 main requirements, which are very easy for most people to meet, particularly the 7 days stay per year, because there are other European programs, but they actually require you to stay in the country for a longer period of time. So it becomes far more inflexible as something to sort of root up and go to a different country just to get your residency. The other key points which continue to make the Portuguese program very, very popular once people start thinking about this is that on the left-hand side at the bottom, you can see that there is no limit for family members. So you can reunify your children, your spouse, your parents who are over the age of 66, provided that they are dependent upon you, etc. So it's a very generous program in that respect. And once you are in the program, you're able to sort of work, live and travel within the Schengen zone. So you do have that European access, which is quite key for many people. And then I'm going to focus on this third point, which is Portugal doesn't operate a system of worldwide income tax. What does that mean? That means that just by becoming a resident of Portugal through its immigration program does not mean that you will become a tax resident, which is very key for a lot of our international investors. Some of our investors are bankers, lawyers, entrepreneurs, etc. And what they are keen to do is, yes, have a plan B through this sort of investment, but they don't want their home income to be suddenly taxed in Portugal. And because Portugal doesn't operate a system of worldwide taxation, indeed, you won't be taxed in Portugal on your non-Portuguese income. And then lastly, there aren't any age limits, etc. So again, it's quite a flexible program. Well, if we go to the next slide. I think the next question that people often have is, because the Golden Visa residency program is for 5 years, what happens after the 5 years? And again, this is where Portugal really shows its flexibility, in that there are 2 options. One is that you could take up what they call permanent residency. Or the second option is to become a citizen of Portugal, i.e. you obtain a passport. And there are differences between the 2. Obviously, permanent residency allows you to live, work, within Portugal only and travel up to 90 days within the Schengen zone, whereas citizenship allows you to live, work, and travel within any EU member state. So it's far more flexible if you become a citizen. Now, why are these two options? It's actually because Portugal recognizes that many international investors are unable to hold two passports. And therefore, if you are an investor, say, for example, from India, because Indian laws do not allow their citizens to hold two passports, an Indian national would typically take up permanent residency as opposed to citizenship. So again, it's flexibility that the Portuguese have thought of when they initially came up with this program, which again leads to its popularity. Next slide, Bella. So just to give people an idea of what the costs are, because on the one hand, there is the access to the program, which comes by investing in an eligible property. But there are also ongoing costs that are paid to the government of Portugal in embarking on the program. And just to set this out, over the 5 years, the typical cost for an individual is between 11 and 12,000 euros per person. So that's over the 5 years. And therefore, for a typical family of four, you're looking at between sort of 44 to 45,000 euros over those 5 years. So again, it makes it a very affordable type of program when you compare it to some of the other European offerings. Next slide, Bella. So as I mentioned, the program itself has been in existence since 2012. And as you might anticipate, as with any sort of regulatory framework, legal framework, there have been changes that have been adopted by the Portuguese into the program. All of the changes, whenever they are coming into effect, they're always prospective in nature. So there isn't anyone that's caught in between the change of law, etc., which is obviously encouraging and useful to know. But if you go to the next slide, Bella, one of the major changes that took place with effect from 1st of January of this year was that the Portuguese recognized that the program had been and continues to be hugely successful. And they wanted to redirect some of that international investment to other areas of Portugal other than the capital city centres. So with effect from 1st of January this year, Lisbon, Porto, and much of the Algarve are excluded from being golden visa eligible investment locations. And again, I say that this is because of the fact that the program itself has been so successful. That rightly so, the Portuguese authorities want to encourage investment into other areas of Portugal outside of the city centre. So this map really tries to set out those areas that continue to be qualifying versus non-qualifying. You can see there an arrow right at the bottom of the southern tip, which is the southern tip of the Algarve, which is an area called Sagres, which indeed is actually where our latest development is. So it's fortuitous that we are located in this area because we are an exception to the change of law in that this location was golden visa eligible before the change of law, and indeed now it continues to be golden visa eligible as a residential investment location. So if you go to the next slide, Bella. Now, I just touched upon it there. Sagres is actually in the region of the Algarve. And I think for those of you who may be familiar with the Algarve or have heard of it, this is just a quick recap of what the Algarve is. The Algarve is on the southernmost part of Portugal. It has all of those beautiful coastline and beaches that are constantly coming up on people's holiday websites. So it is very much known for its touristic region. It is also extremely popular from a golfing perspective, and it has in excess of 35, 40 international golf courses. But what drew us as a real estate investor to the region was actually this metric where you can see that the GDP per capita within the Algarve was 83% of the EU average. And in fact, that is the second highest in the country, so behind Lisbon only, actually. So it's not Lisbon and then Porto, it's Lisbon and then the Algarve Now, what does that tell us? That tells us the sort of micro economy and how it performs and how affluent it is. And actually, the local economy is actually quite diverse in that, yes, it does have a strong tourism sector, but it also has some other strands to it, which include agricultural, fishing, and real estate itself. So from our perspective, when we looked at the Algarve, these are the sort of things that we wanted to understand about the microeconomy. Next slide, Bella. And when you take into account some of those microeconomic factors together with some of the macro level factors that Grant will be running through, what are the real estate growth drivers within this particular region? And I think we've categorized it into three main segments, all of which I think support this micro location. The first of which is that since COVID, I think we've probably experienced this the world over, but there has been a tendency for people to move out of city centres, which are congested, etc., and relocate either to their holiday home or to somewhere which has more open space. So I think what we found within Portugal itself, that is very much the case. And the Algarve has always been popular for the Portuguese during the holiday season, but now it's becoming more of a lifestyle destination as well. So I guess the first point is that local demand, i.e. Portuguese demand, is up for this particular region. So it's a very good starting point. Secondly, and for similar reasons, we have what you call, or what I call, the EU second homers. These are people from Germany, the Netherlands, France, etc., that have always found the Algarve an attractive place to be. It has an attractive price point for them. And I think for people that want to have that leisure aspect to their lives will continue to be buying in the Algarve. And then the third factor is really international demand. Some surprise factors that we have certainly witnessed ourselves is that since Brexit, we have any number of UK investors looking to re-access the EU through this type of investment. We've also been very surprised by the number of US investors that we have in this particular development in Sagres. I think Rosalia will explain that to you in a bit more detail. And then lastly, you continue to have demand from golden visa motivated investors. I think there's plenty of dislocation, unfortunately, going around the world that causes people to be driven to this type of investment. But with Sagres being the exception to the change of law that has happened since the 1st of January of this year, we believe that that will continue to support the growth in terms of capital levels within the region. Next slide, Bella. So I think that neatly leads us on to our latest development, which is in Sagres, as I mentioned. It's called South Beach Sagres. And for that, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Rosalia, who's going to be able to talk you through some of the detail of that development itself. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rag. And thank you, Grant, for the introduction before and for coordinating the event. It is a pleasure to be here. And for those that don't know me, I'm the head of sales of Arish Capital Partners, and I'm going to take you through the next slides on our latest project. Bella, if you help me, thank you. So South Beach Sagres is, as Rag mentioned, a project that is fully eligible for golden visa. So for those that are motivated to find a solution to have a second residency, this could be the vehicle to take them through. However, it's a lot more than that. South Beach Sagres is a beautiful project by the beach that gives a great opportunity of investment. It is a refurbishment project, so we are actually refurbishing a building that already exists, and we are converting it into a residential condominium gated community of 120 units. This is divided into 92 studios and 28 two-bedrooms, and all of them come with a parking space included in the price. The studios are starting at 280,000 euros and two bedrooms at 359,000 euros. With the development is actually, as Rag mentioned, in Sagres, which is a beach town in Algarve, and is right in the middle of the city center, but at the same time, 200 meters from the beach. It has beautiful, high quality finishes. We will take you through some of the images. And it is freehold and full ownership project. So this is very important because for those that are not familiarized with Portugal, it is actually a very secure legal frame for real estate. And at the time that you sign your title deed, you become full owner of the property and have full control on it, whether you want to rent it out, to sell it throughout the time. But still, for those that want to have a full, convenient, hands-off investment, we do offer the option to have a fixed rent, and that will be at 3% for 5 years. So this is optional, but for those that are not likely to use the apartment as much, that they just want to have a return out of it during the period that they hold the apartment until they exit, we do offer from completion until 5-year time a 3% that is paid a quarterly basis. If you decide to go for this option, still can use the apartment 14 days a year free of charge, and this will be off-peak season, so not during summer and not in the month of December. So Bella, we can now move to the next slide. Thank you. This is the project, as I mentioned, 200 meters from the beach. It is 4 buildings, building A, B, C, and D. It has beautiful facilities. We do have a lagoon pool, an on-site gym, rooftop terrace on building B, as you see in the image, surfing room, which is very popular in the area, landscape gardens, beautiful Balinese style reception, and all of these is private access of the owners. Buildings C and D are fully sold out, and we do have units in building B that are 2-bedroom units, and studios in building A. Some of them are beautiful options with a private garden, some of them on top floor. So we have a variety depending on the preferences. If we move to the next slide, please, Bella. We see some more of those images. So this is building B that has all the facilities, the rooftop, and the gym are located in building B. And then right behind is building A that has, all of them are studios. Amenities, as I mentioned, plenty of amenities. Here you see some of the images on the of the rooftop terrace, of the lagoon pool, and on the reception and the lobby of the condominium. Studio units available. As we said, this is a total of 120 units in the condominium. We have only 90 units for sale. As my colleague Raquel mentioned at the beginning, we are an investment company, and we do tend to actually retain some of the units, sometimes the retail, sometimes some of the units of the development for ourselves. In this case, we are retaining 30 of the units with the intention to have them rented out and sell them at a later stage, of course, at a higher value. And out of the 90 that are for sale, we have already sold 61. So we have the last 29 units available, some of them in building A, which are 21 studios, and others 2-bedroom, 8 units in building B. There is a lot of detail, of course, on the properties, the floor plans, the map of finishes, etc., that is available with Grant for those that have interest. But just to summarize some of the best or the major benefits of the project, it is an excellent location within the region of Algarve. We do have the option of have a fixed rent for 5 years for those who want to have a very hands-on convenient investment. It is Golden Visa eligible for the lowest entry point of 280,000 euros. And it is a full legal freehold title. So it's not a co-ownership, it's not shares. This is a full title deed at the time that it gets refurbished. 2 things that are quite important is that we do have a parking space that is included in each of the units, and we are running a promotion until the end of March for the furniture pack. So the studios will be delivered, will be handed over under this promotion fully furnished, and this will be within the price of the 280,000. furniture that it goes from the big furniture, the sofa, the bed, etc., but also to all those small things that are important to rent it out, from pillows and seats and towels, cutlery, etc. All that is included. For the 2 bedrooms, we are giving a 50% discount on the furniture pack. Original price of the furniture pack is 24,000 euros plus VAT. So that is actually a relevant saving. And with this, I think, Grant, that I covered the major points of the project, and I pass back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. That was a really good overview of the scheme, and absolutely makes me want to be there.
Thank you.
On a cold February evening in Hong Kong. So yeah, very attractive project indeed. And Rakesh, thank you so much for the overview of the actual Golden Visa scheme, and really sort of talking through those great points that make it stand out from some of the other opportunities for passporting and citizenship. So now we're at the point where we're going to take some questions, and I do know that there's been quite a few. We probably won't have enough time for all of them, but absolutely we will make sure we do follow up on those questions. So there's actually the first one. The first one here is, what are the benefits of investing in low density areas? So this is obviously relevant to the fact that as Rakesh was explaining, you can no longer buy residential property in Lisbon and Porto, but obviously somewhere like this you can do. Now I know you've touched on a few points. I mean, first of all, I would just add one point, and I'd like to get your views on this. Obviously, Lisbon and Porto prices have risen quite significantly over years, and obviously that's been impacted by Golden Visa. So, my thoughts would be, because this is a new designated area, if you like, for Golden Visa in recent times, then I would assume that you would expect similar excellent growth over the next number of years, given there will be a lot of capital coming into this type of location through Golden Visa, which will in itself drive prices.
Yeah, Grant, I think I would agree with that, in that I think we see the change of law now that's created perhaps an opportunity for people to become invested and at the same time realize their ambitions of A, having a good investment, B, achieving their Golden Visa status, whatever that may be, but also ensuring that the investment performs and behaves as they would for any property investment, i.e. you want it to produce yield, you want it to produce capital growth. And from our perspective, Sagres, given that it is in the exception to the change of law, it's the only place where you can do residential Golden Visa by the beach. I mean, beachside locations are at a premium anyways, but with this added feature, I think you'll see that capital growth. So yes, it is a low density area, but in fact, the whole of the Algarve is low density, and you'll see pockets of the Algarve which have far outperformed, the islands of Ibiza, etc. as well. Just to give some real metrics behind that, perhaps, we've looked at it from our own perspective, because clearly we're retaining 30 of the apartments ourselves. And we've broken it down in terms of both capital growth predictions and income yield predictions. And what we've done is empirically looked at what's happened in the area. So on the left-hand side, you can see case study 1, which is the Martignal Villas, which is a luxury development of a hotel and residential villa project from 2011. And interestingly, this is on the same beachfront as us, so 4 minutes walk away. The residential townhouses, which are 2 bedrooms, were launched at the time in 2011 for 220,000. And now they trade at an average of around 500,000. So you have very real evidence of how your capital may perform on your doorstep, effectively. So I think that's important for people to understand. And then secondly, on the income and yield front, well, we have next door to us, again, on the same beachfront, the Memo Bolero Hotel, which is 50 meters from us. And there in the high season, the average overnight stays are in excess of 300 euros a night. And it doesn't really fall below the 150, 160 mark. So again, you have very good evidence on your doorstep of how the rentability and the income that you can expect from this particular development. As Rossi mentioned, we are offering this option for a fixed return for 5 years at 3%. We're doing that because we know a lot of international investors want convenience. But if you have someone that is perhaps a little bit more hands-on, then this also gives you some good thinking around how you could outperform that 3%.
Great. Thank you, Rakesh. That's really sort of cemented the fact that it is an excellent location to invest in. There is another question actually here that is basically asking actually for some more detail on the scheme, asking perhaps Rosie if you can go into a bit more detail in terms of the specifics on the location and what's going on there, if you may.
And Sagres, for sure, for sure. I actually have some slides on this because we always get the lot of interest on understanding a little bit more the micro location, which is very fair, right? When you're looking into an investment. So if you actually, Bella, go 3 slides, I think the previous one, wonderful. So Sagres is just on the western spot of the region where the Atlantic Ocean joins the Mediterranean. And that's actually very privileged spot because you have all around beach and they are very different from each other. It's a beautiful spot. So we have the nearest beach is only 200 meters, but within 1.5 kilometer, we have another 6. So you can walk to a different beach every day. It's such a beautiful spot. In terms of entertainment, Bella, if we move to the next slide, Algarve is actually very, very well known for golfing. So we have over 30 international golf courses with international tournaments throughout all the years. So quite a lot of activity happening around golfing. We have also in the next slide, we see lots of restaurants around us. So within walking distance of the project, you have every kind of service from supermarkets and pharmacies, etc. But a lot of entertainment activities, high-end restaurants in the hotels, and also the local seafood places right on the same sand of the beach. And last thing that I would mention is hotels. If we see in the next slide, we have also plenty of hotel options. These are some of a selection of 3 that we particularly like. Memo Valleira and Martignal are actually the ones that Rakesh was just talking about. Memo Valleira is 50 meters from us, beautiful beachfront hotel built in 2017 with beach access, swimming pool, restaurants, etc. Same thing for Martignal. Martignal Hotel is a 5-star hotel with a spa. And Mareta is also a beautiful hotel just right by the beach. So everything is within walking distance of our project.
Great, thank you, Rosie. You're clearly getting people interested in this scheme because someone's asked about the payment plan, which is always an encouraging sign. There was actually also a question on mortgaging, and I can answer that one just to say that this is actually purely cash purchase investment. But yeah, Rosie, if you can share details on the payment plan for this as a cash-based purchase, yeah.
Of course. Okay, so let's say that one of our clients was to decide today on onboarding to the project. First thing that we would do would be to choose the unit. So we will look into the options with them, what are the best units available, to understand the preferences, and when they have chosen the unit, we would sign a reservation agreement. Reservation agreement that is signed along a deposit of 10,000 euros, and this is what allows us to take the unit off the market. These 10,000 euros are the only amount that we would be able to receive from abroad. Everything else will have to be through the own account of the investor in Portugal. And this is not our own requirement. This is a requirement of the immigration entity in Portugal for those that are looking into the golden visa. So we would have around 45 to 60 days when the lawyers would help the investor to open the account, get a tax number, sign the power of attorney, and do everything that is required for us to be able to sign the sales and purchase agreement. So in 60 days, we would sign the sales and purchase agreement and the payment of around 70% of the total price, which it would be 200,000 euros of the 280 for the studios would be paid. At that time, the property would be already registered in the land department on the name of the client, and the client would be able to apply for the golden visa. This is an application online, and everything that I described until now happens remotely. So there is no need for the client, if they don't wish to do so, or if they are limited these days with whatever regulations in the country, there is no need for them to travel at this until now. It is only the time that this actually submission gets approved, then it takes another around 60 days, that the lawyer will be contacting them and say, now your golden visa is approved, please come to do your biometrics, so we finalize the process. And this is exactly when we would be signing the deeds. When we sign the deeds, the balance payment, this is 80,000 euros, would be paid. So to summarize, grants 10,000 euros at the time of the deposit, 45 to 60 days later, 200,000 euros if we are talking about the studio, and in additional 60 days, 80,000 euros. And when we sign the deeds, we refund the initial deposit of the 10,000 euros. So 10,000, 60 days, 200,000, additional 60 days, 80,000.
Great, that's very comprehensive, Rosie. Thank you for that. And actually, just leading on from that, another question is, if an investor did not take the rental guarantee, are they restricted to how many days they can use the apartment, or is it up to them basically if they do not take the rental guarantee?
Exactly, no limitations at all. So this is a residential project. This is not a hotel with a long-term management contract in place. We do have actually quite a few families that are planning to move here to live in the apartment, and some of others to use it as a holiday home. So it is a choice. Is it an option? And even for those that decide to sign the 5 years lease at the 3%, they can break it at any point of time. So even if they change their mind in year 1, year 2, year 3, they can break the contract. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. Good options there. And you know, I should imagine the rental market would be very strong, as Rakesh shared earlier. You know, workations, you know, perfect in the new sort of post-COVID world. Obviously, the you know, the other member states, you know, from France and Germany, and obviously, you know, people obviously from the UK. It's a very established destination. So, okay. Rakesh, I don't want to leave you out there on the question. So
Sure.
One of the questions here is, in terms of the actual legal process, can Arish Capital help with that side? So in other words, obviously, you know, great project here. Can you help with all the legals? Can you actually file the application on behalf of the investor?
Yeah, so obviously we've now sold multiple units of this development, but we've also done multiple developments of our prior ones. So we have a very good track record in shepherding transactions through for the investor, both in terms of the real estate side, ensuring that they get their title deeds, etc., but also ensuring that they realize their golden visa ambitions in terms of filing applications, etc. So we do have a pack that is pretty much ready-made and tailor-made for investors to look at, but perhaps more importantly for them to engage with their lawyers and get their lawyers to do all of the due diligence, etc. So that is a ready pack. However, what I would say is that because it is important that anyone that's investing into Portugal has their own Portuguese lawyer so that they can be independently advised away from us. What typically tends to happen is that we work with buyers' lawyers in Portugal, give them this pack of information so that they can get going on the due diligence of the property, etc., but also filing those golden visa application forms as well. And whatever assistance is required of us, we pretty much anticipated every question that all of the lawyers can ask us, so it should be there in our pack. But if not, we're happy to assist additionally as well. And if people don't know which Portuguese law firm to go to, we have a panel of 3 that we often recommend our buyers go to. They offer a very good hands-on service. They're very good at dealing with international investors, etc. So we can also recommend those lawyers as well.
Okay, that's very helpful for investors, of course, so they have the whole suite of opportunity when they make the investment for the legal work to be done. Okay. Another question here. So actually, this is sort of quite relevant in today's world. Obviously, we all know about sort of supply chain issues, etc., and we have seen sort of projects delayed. So someone is asking here, what protections are there if the project is delayed in building? So what protection does the investor have?
Yeah, and as it may be apparent, but maybe I should just say it as well, is that because the Golden Visa program is made available through this particular investment because it qualifies as a renovation project, the investor actually enters into two contracts, which they need to do so from an immigration perspective. The first one is the real estate purchase contract, which gives them the title deed over their particular unit, etc. But the second one is actually a renovation contract, which they enter into with a contractor, but obviously we, Arish, manage that process. But the benefit of that, of being a direct participant in that renovation agreement, is that there are any number of protections that are built into that agreement that favor the investor. So, for example, if there are delays in the delivery of the renovation project, there are delay penalties that the contractor must pay to the investor. And those delay penalties, I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head at the moment, but they're pretty much geared towards ensuring that the investor gets effectively a yield on their investment as if it had been built and were receiving rent. So it's quite a useful tool that investors have for peace of mind, but also a useful tool ensuring that the contractor doesn't delay in the first place, because it can be quite an expensive hobby for them if they continue to delay.
Right. Okay. That's yeah, that's very comprehensive coverage for the investor. Okay. I think we've got time for one more question, and actually, I will pass it to you, Rakesh, just to even things out a bit. It's gone through. So, what will happen after the 5 years? So, in other words, the client's gone through the process. They've got the golden visa. We get to the 5 years. Mm-hmm. Can you just maybe explain the final steps in terms of citizenship or taking the passport?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, Bella, if you can flip back to the slide, which is called options after 5 years, because I think that will help to diagrammatically show what happens. But in essence, after the 5 years, investors have a choice. And if they're going for citizenship, i.e. passport, then what tends to happen is that they make an application. Probably the same lawyer that they've used for the 5 years of the golden visa will do their citizenship application. And that application is quite a simple application. It takes around 6 to 9 months before it is accepted and then processed for a passport. It does come with a simple requirement in that you need to take a Portuguese language test to become a citizen. And I should say at that point, not to worry, because if you think about the European language scales, they start at A1, A2, A3, and they go on to C3, with C3 being the most difficult. The language test that is imposed upon people for the purposes of citizenship is A2 level. So I typically describe that as if you could go into a Starbucks, say hello and order a coffee in Portuguese, you're pretty much good to go. So I think that the requirements are fairly simple. It's an application that your lawyer does. It takes around 6 to 9 months, and there is a language test, but people shouldn't worry about that language test, at which point you realize your ambition and become a citizen of Portugal. I should also say that actually once you've acquired your citizenship, you don't need to hold your property anymore, so you can sell it, and that won't in any way mitigate against your citizenship, because once you have your citizenship, you have it for life, and you're able to pass it down the chain in terms of your children, etc. as well.
Okay, and actually just one final question. Top three sort of nationalities who've been going for the golden visa opportunity. What sort of nationalities are you seeing attracted to this?
Yeah, I mean, and Rossi, jump in as well if I miss anything. I think that the landscape is to some extent always changing a little bit. Sometimes it's driven by whatever geopolitical problems there may be in certain countries, and that causes an influx. But in general, I think we have a very good mix of nationalities. I think we, at last count, we had 26 or 27 different countries of investors. It ranges from the Middle East to Americans now more recently. Obviously, Southeast Asia has always been an important market. And then in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, we've had a lot of interest from Russia, Ukraine, etc. Perhaps that is somewhat explained by the political crisis that's going on there at the moment. But it is a broad range of investors. It does ebb and flow, as I say, dependent upon perhaps some political problem around the world. But in general, I think we've probably come across most of the major nationalities. South Africans have always been very strong. And I think the South Africans particularly like some of these investments that are at the lower investment threshold, because they obviously have currency reserve and restriction issues, etc. as well. So it's a broad mix. Rossi, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's very representative. The other nationality that is always on the statistics is also Turkey, but I would say that yes, along the Asia, Turkey, South Africa, those are normally the ones in the statistics. And for us, it's been US, right? Our project of Southeast Sagres has been extremely popular with the US, and I think about 50% or 45%, right, Track, have buyers are from the US.
Exactly. Yeah, interesting. And presumably there's been a lot of inquiries from the UK as well since Brexit, I would imagine, across your projects over the last year or two.
Correct, yes.
Yes, absolutely,
yeah. Okay, so we're just coming up to the hour mark, so we've still got other questions, but I think maybe we'll sort of draw it to a close there. I think that's been a really informative presentation, and some really excellent presentations from Rosie and Rakesh once more. So I thank you very much indeed for your time today and sharing your expertise across the Golden Visa and the opportunity that's presented here in the Algarve. So from my side, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. We will get back to you on the remaining questions. Do keep them coming. And certainly I look forward to following up with attendees and answering their questions and providing the necessary information on this opportunity with Arish Capital. So all that remains me to say is thank you very much indeed for attending. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. And Rosie, Rakesh, I wish you well on your upcoming US trip. I hope that goes well. And I look forward to working with you both again soon. And again, thank you for attending the webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Grant. Thank you everyone for attending as well.
Thank you, everyone.